The RAP plan is going live July 1st. If you have federal student loans, you need to understand what this means for you and figure out what payment plan you should actually be on. Today, I have joining me Kaitlin Hile. She is a clinical pharmacy specialist by training, but has also completed coursework on federal student loan strategy through the CSLA Institute. And she is going to talk with us about what the RAP plan looks like and how to know what you should do with your federal student loans come July 1st. Kaitlin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is a very timely discussion, and hopefully we can ease some of the anxiety that comes with any of the student loan transitions that come up.
So what the heck is RAP, and why or how is it different from SAVE?
Good question. So the RAP plan, that stands for Repayment Assistance Plan. That was created by the One Big Beautiful Bill last summer, and it will be going live July 1st of this year, of 2026. Now, it's essentially like replacing the SAVE plan, but there's a lot of differences between SAVE and this new income-driven repayment plan, RAP. So do you want me to first walk through like how we calculate payments on the RAP plan?
Sure, I think that would be helpful. And honestly, I think maybe a comparison of how that's different or changed from SAVE would be helpful because I think a lot of people understood that income-driven repayment plan option, and this feels foreign and different.
Yes, it is foreign and different, so I definitely get that feeling. Let's start with how the RAP plan calculates out payments. So first, you're going to take your income and subtract out any pre-tax contributions that you're making to your 401k or HSA, anything like that. That gives you your AGI. Now that stands for adjusted gross income. Now for the RAP plan, based off of your AGI, there is a percentage of your AGI that you will pay. So if you have a higher income, let's say if your AGI is over $100,000, you pay 10% of your AGI on the RAP plan. Now contrast that with somebody with an AGI, we'll say of $55,000. They're paying 5% of their AGI. So it's a sliding scale based off of how high your AGI is. Now, for a lot of healthcare professionals, you're going to hit that 100K mark and be paying 10% of adjusted gross income. Now, Kristen, you brought up a good point of how does this differ from the other income-driven repayment plans that have been around for a while? Those plans, you start out the same way, right? You take your income, you subtract out pre-tax contributions, and you get your AGI. But then you also subtracted 150% of the federal poverty line based off of your household income or based off of your household size. Now that got you what's called a discretionary income, which is inherently lower than your AGI, right? And then you took a percentage of your discretionary income to determine your payment. So you might look at this and say, oh, well, on the IBR plan, I would pay 10% of income. And on the RAP plan, I would pay 10% of income. So it's going to be the exact same. No, it's not. You're actually taking 10% of two different income calculations. And so that's, I think, what confuses a lot of people about this and what makes these calculations a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, we can talk more about IBR versus RAP, but I do want to point out, I think there is a group of medical professionals who hears like, oh, this is based on, percent of AGI. And it kind of feels like the people in the same camp when it comes to taxes. It's like, well, I don't want to earn more because then I'm going to pay more in tax or then my student loan payment's going to be higher. First off, the answer is always to earn more, right? And you can lower your AGI artificially through pre-tax investments, pre-tax contributions to a variety of tax advantage accounts. So the goal is earn more, use strategy, right? Not like earn less because I want my AGI to be less than this 100K mark. That's really silly. For both of those groups of people, I think you have to recognize first, like once I maximize my income, then I ask myself, how do I lower my student loan payment or how do I lower my tax burden, whatever you're looking at, and start utilizing strategy to fix that number. But you never want to let the student loan tail wag the dog or the tax tail wag the dog and say, hey, I don't want to be up in this higher bracket. And so I think it's a great idea for me to settle for this crappy low paying job.
Nope, that's never the answer. Step one is always maximize your income to the utmost of your ability. And then the student loan strategy comes into play where how can we drive down that payment despite your higher income, right? That's always the goal, is to find that balance there.
So would you say it's a truth that for most people, their payment on RAP is going to be higher than it was on SAVE?
Oh, absolutely, compared to the SAVE plan. But that's been gone for so long, a lot of people don't even remember like what their SAVE payment would have been because you've been in forbearance for so long. For a lot of folks, RAP will be higher than if they're on the pay plan right now. And then it may or may not be higher than IBR, depending on your classification on that plan. So I can't give you like for every single person, RAP is going to be better or worse. It might depend on your income, your family size, and when you first started borrowing federal student loans.
What do you mean by that when you first started borrowing federal student loans?
Yes, so for the income-based repayment plan, or IBR, your payment on that plan is dictated based off of whether or not you had a federal student loan balance on July 1st of 2014. I know that's like an incredibly arbitrary date, but it's actually a really important one in the student loan world. So to tell you like how meaningful that number can be, or that date is, if you had a federal student loan balance on that day, July 1st, 2014, you're treated as an old borrower on IBR. I hate the name of that. I feel like it's kind of insulting, but nonetheless, an old borrower, you pay 15% of discretionary income. Now, if you didn't have a federal student loan balance on that exact day, you're a new borrower on IBR and you only have to pay 10% of discretionary income. That's a pretty big difference in your
Yes.
monthly payment based solely off of when you first started borrowing federal student loans.
That's helpful to recognize. And I agree, the term old is a little insulting. But for a lot of folks, to be able to say that you had been started to take out federal student loans in 2014, for most people in their first 5 years of practice, that's probably not the case. And depending on when you started undergrad. And so that's likely to be less of an important point. But for those of you out there that are a little bit more seasoned or have been in practice for 5, 10, 15 years, this is a really important nuance for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a lot of people that qualify as a new borrower on IBR, I would say the majority of the time that will be more favorable for you than the RAP plan. Now, if you're an old borrower on IBR, that may not be the case, and RAP may be more beneficial for you. There's a couple of other perks to the RAP plan that we haven't talked about. One of which is if you have any dependents, that subtracts $50 a month from your payment for each dependent that you claim on your tax return. The other nice advantage with the RAP plan is an interest subsidy. So if your payment is lower than the amount of interest that's accruing on your loans each month, they waive that remaining interest and your balance isn't like ballooning out under you. So that's a nice advantage as well. And then there's also a principal subsidy. So if your payment doesn't decrease the principal on your loans by at least $50 a month, they'll drop the principal by $50 a month for you. So some nice advantages there that we don't see incorporated into the other income-driven repayment plans.
Yeah, absolutely. I am laughing a little bit. I appreciate the added dependent, take $50 a month off. But looking at my own budget, I'm like, my dependents cost much more than $50 a month. So yeah, laughing a bit at that one. I do think it's helpful context. We had said like, hey, what's going to be more beneficial to you? Is it going to be new IBR? Is it going to be RAP? Beneficial to you, of course, is in context. And what we are actually saying when we say that is a lower monthly payment. But of course, you have to view all of that in lens of the student loan strategy that you're on. I talk about the core 4 student loan strategies inside the PA Millionaire Path, namely standard student loan repayment, accelerated student loan repayment, taxable loan forgiveness, or a forgiveness modality, classically PSLF. And so the group of the core 4 that's going to benefit the absolute most from having the lowest monthly payment is going to be the people doing public service loan forgiveness, recognizing that absolutely everything will be wiped away at that 120 qualifying payment mark, totally tax-free. Now, of course, for people pursuing taxable loan forgiveness, having a low payment is nice for monthly cash flow and it allows you more money to invest. Plus, some of these perks on RAP may help you, like the interest subsidy and things like that, to help maybe lower what you'll have forgiven at the end and then maybe mitigate that tax bomb a bit. But you have to view all of this through the big picture lens of like, what's my overarching plan for my student loan debt?
And that's even more important with RAP than ever before because the taxable loan forgiveness timeline for the RAP plan is actually 30 years. That's longer than any of the other income driven repayment plans. I mean, that's literally the same as most mortgages, right? Like you're really holding on to those student loans for a long period of time. You'd better be darn sure that's the right pathway for you to be on. And you can't just fall into the trap of clicking like, oh, I just want the lowest monthly payment. That's not how we think about student loan strategy. We have to look at the 30,000-foot view first.
Yeah, for PAs, NPs, and pharmacists in particular, there are so many qualifying positions for PSLF that if you have a really high debt to income ratio, you really have to sit down and prudently evaluate, do I just need to go find a qualifying position? Because you can find one realistically in almost all subspecialties in those arenas, with maybe a few exceptions to that. Now, for other professionals like vets, for example, chiropractors, for example, dentists, for example, those professions have much less in terms of qualifying PSLF positions available. And so you might genuinely be on a taxable loan forgiveness path because that's your clear path towards a higher income, and a qualifying position is just not going to happen. So keep all of that in the back of your mind before you say like, yep, I'm going to sign up for RAP. I'm on the 30-year taxable loan forgiveness plan. Make sure that's prudent. Make sure that you haven't maximized your income through a qualifying PSLF position first. For years, I've always made the joke that taxable loan forgiveness kind of sounded like the sentencing on a Law and Order episode of like, you 25 to life. But now it's 30 to life, and it doesn't have the same ring, but it is a long time. So like you said, just be very cautious. Make sure that that is in fact what you should be doing with your student loan debt.
Yeah, and I think as you're do I need to think about a PSLF qualifying employer? The first metric that I would think about is what your debt to income ratio is. If you're not familiar with that term, you're basically going to add up all of your student loan debt and compare that to your annual income. If you're still in school, look at the median for a new grad position, right? Look at that ratio. If it's greater than 1, you at least need to run a detailed analysis on what PSLF would look like for you. If it's greater than 2 or greater than 3 to 1, PSLF really starts to make a lot of sense in that type of a situation.
Very, very helpful metric to know. And to be frank, a really helpful metric to plan. If you happen to be listening to this and you are not yet in graduate school and you're planning, or you're in graduate school trying to figure out what's an appropriate amount of discretionary money for me to live off of while I'm in this program, intentional choice surrounding debt to income ratio is probably the most important thing you can do with student loan debt on the front end. Logistical question, Kaitlin. If someone said, hey, it's about to be July, I want to get on the RAP plan. I know what I'm doing. I know my student loan strategy. That's going to be the best path for me. Logistically, how do you do that?
There will be an application on the Federal Student Aid website or through your student loan servicer. It is supposed to go live July 1st. Of course, we're on a government time frame, right? And so I will believe it when I see it. They're predicting July 1st. I will say I anticipate it taking a hot second for them to process all of these applications. There will be a lot of people who are trying to get off of Save Forbearance, enter into RAP, or change to a different plan all at the same time. And their workforce right now is severely diminished. And so they're in the process of trying to hire new team members to be able to withstand what's coming their way. It's going to be a tsunami wave of paperwork for them to process. But don't be surprised if it's not as quick of a return as you're hoping for in terms of them processing those applications.
That's helpful. And don't forget, if you have a kid, the Trump account application also opens July 1. So we've got things to do on July 1, depending on your student loan plans and whether or not you have a kid in that window.
Yes. And also July 1st, it's a big day. That is when they're going to start sending 90-day notice to those that are on Save Forbearance. They haven't been very clear if they're going to do one blanket message to everyone at the same time or if they'll be sending those out in waves. My guess is it's going to go out in waves due to their limited workforce at this time. But once you get that notification, that gives you 90 days to get off of the Save plan and onto whatever student loan strategy is going to be your next chapter.
All right, Kaitlin, this has been super helpful. I think anyone listening to this who has an interest in being on an income-driven repayment plan should probably take a double listen. Make sure that you fully understand how RAP works, how the payments are calculated and if it is the correct income-driven RIP plan for you based upon your student loan strategy, your AGI, your household size, and all of those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not a decision you should take lightly. There are really, really big ramifications for these decisions. So make sure you're running the numbers multiple times before you make your final selection.
All right, Kaitlin, thanks for your help. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.